RealAgriculture.com presents Under the Microscope with BioVision Seed Labs.
All right, we are here with Holly Gelech, Business Development Manager with BioVision Seed Labs, and here in Winnipeg, which is a little different than our usual Skype conversations. Let's talk about vigor testing.
Yes.
And the difference between how seed lots are treated under a germ test versus a vigor test. So tell us what the difference is there.
Okay, the germination test is a standard test across Canada, and it is under the Seeds Act and the grade tables. It's something in order to sell pedigreed seed, no matter what grade, whether you're certified or registered or foundation, a germination test needs to be done. And the germination test is growing the seeds under absolute ideal conditions. And that means not only moisture conditions, it means adequate heat conditions, and the actual perfect media as well. So some medias are blotter paper, some medias are roll tower for the larger species such as soybeans and corn, etc. So it's absolutely ideal conditions of germination test.
Okay, so now conversely, we have a vigor test, which a vigor test is quite different. And is it standardized?
I would say the answer to that is across Canada, it's not standardized between tests. So that is what I'd like to stress, is the importance of talking to your lab. Become a partner with your lab and ask them, what are you doing in your stress test?
Right.
Now, majority of the labs are doing cool stress test, and that's taking the seeds, putting them under dark conditions, adequate moisture, because we need to get it to sprout in order to evaluate it, but it's under cool conditions.
Right. So how cool?
That would be 7 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
And so it is grown under that media for anywhere from 7 to 10 days, depending on the crop species. And then it's moved to the warm chamber to promote sprouting. And at that point, then we're able to, after another period of time, evaluate the seedlings based off of their structures. Did they sprout? Second off, did they, and are they classified as vigorous or non-vigorous?
Okay, and so what might be a difference between vigorous and non-vigorous?
It's primarily the measurement and evaluation of the root and the shoot development.
Okay. So it would be looking at if maybe it's abnormal or stunted or those sorts of things. So we have a copy of a vigor test here,
Yes.
And it's pretty straightforward, but it's certainly, you're not just getting a kind of pass-fail, you're getting a percentage of seedlings that you would consider vigorous.
Yes.
But then I also noticed here you get non-vigorous seedlings and no growth. So the no growth could be dormant, or would they likely be dead?
They could be a combination of both, and it depends on the year. This year we've seen very little dormancy,
Right.
so in that case it would be dead. In other years, prior 2 years, we've seen a lot of dormancy, but primarily we're able to break that dormancy because of pre-chill.
Right.
Because you're chilling it the first 7 days, you are breaking that dormancy. That's a method that we can use to break dormancy. So quite often they're dead, so no growth is dead.
Okay, and now when we talk about non-vigorous seedlings, obviously it's a measure of those that struggled or have maybe not as good structures, or maybe the structures are abnormal. Will those go on to, I guess it's somewhat subjective in what will happen with those, but that's a less likelihood that they're actually going to mature and contribute to yield? Is that sort of the...
It's really, the cool stress test really tells the producer how it's going to respond if it's under cool conditions for a very long period of time. So those non-vigorous seedlings tend to then be more subjective to pathogens coming in, and that's soil-borne pathogens, so they are the ones that tend to get infected quicker than the vigorous sprouts. So when we're looking at reports of analysis, you need to make sure that you understand what type of vigor test that you've asked for. Right. So the laboratories will put on there what specifically they're evaluating, and that being cool stress test. So consider that cool versus germination, which is ideal conditions.
Okay. Now let's switch gears a little bit, because we certainly, we're here into winter, and there's obviously some tests that go on into storage, and then of course we've kind of got the second season where we want to make sure that we're doing a test as close to seeding as possible, that we can make decisions with what we have in our hand. Now some crops, and across crop types, but even across area, went into the bin very hot, very dry. We've certainly heard about a lot of cracks on the bigger seeds, on soybeans, those sorts of things. How does binning conditions affect germ and vigor?
Well, it's very important to bring down that heat as quickly as possible. We see a damage due to heating in bins, damage due to batch grain dryers in years other than similar to this.
Yes, yeah.
So excessive heating for long periods of time can basically make the embryo die. So it's very important to bring that down, that temperature, as quickly as possible. In a lot of cases, such as this year, it didn't happen quickly because we didn't see the cool conditions coming, but there's nothing you can do to mitigate that. So the primary message is, test as soon, right away. If you're concerned about heating, and that's something in cereals, we do see heat damage on cereals, and we can identify that very quickly in the lab. It's not just smelling the odor, but also within the germination test, we can identify those seedlings that have heat damage.
Okay, absolutely. And so certainly if it was something that maybe you were concerned about and maybe you didn't test in the fall, absolutely something you need to do before heading to the field.
Absolutely. And one thing I do want to stress is not looking at doing it right before you head into the field.
Yeah.
That is too late.
Yeah.
I always say if you're looking at doing another test for whatever reason, whether it's you're just recently cleaned it or you're looking at a little closer to seeding, I always say to do it, submit the sample late February so that we can get it in our hands, plant it out in March, and then if there is a problem, then you have time to react and look for another seed source.
Yes. And let's just touch briefly on perhaps interpreting some of the disease results as well.
Yes.
Let's certainly, there are certain diseases that if they're there, you can work with a seed treatment and sort of manage your risk that way. But again, this comes to the importance of timing as well. What if let's talk maybe pulses a little bit. What are maybe some of the biggest threats to seeds as far as needing to find another seed source? Are there a couple that are big red flags that farmers just need to say it's not suitable for seed and to move on?
Well, the one thing that we're seeing this year is Ascochyta in peas in Alberta and Saskatchewan. There's very, very high infection levels, and in some cases it's as high as we've ever seen from our diagnostics department, and we're talking that 16 to 22% range of Ascochyta. Yeah. So that is a big red flag. It's hard to say where you drop that line. Typical years we'd see Ascochyta in that 5% would be more of a higher end, 6-7%. But when you're getting up into the high teens and 20s, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Thanks so much, Holly.
Thank you.